Hello again, everyone. Ambassador Terry with another fabulous talk around what we're doing with our book, People Come First Live, and another fabulous special guest and dear friend and colleague, Rob Pardi, is with us today, and we're talking about action, and he is about action. And I lost my wife to Sweden, and who knows how that's going to end up. But here they are. Here we are. We're live, and we're glad you're with us. Rob, welcome. This is so fabulous that we got you on here.
I am thrilled to be here. A big call out to anyone listening. I am on the sea side in Italy, and I don't have great internet connection. So fingers crossed.
So that's good news and good news, right?
Rob, what side of Italy? I'm sorry. What side of Italy is not on the seaside?
Actually, I could be in Umbria, right? But you're right. That's not a side though. That is the center. That is the center.
That's okay. Sorry, Terry. Go ahead, please.
Well, now that we have our geography down, we'll ask the girls what they're doing. Hey, girls, come on in.
We're not girls. We're women. We're wild women.
Yes, we are.
We watch Outlander.
We're together, I must say.
Wild
it's been
women.
amazing having Linda visiting. Thank you, Terry. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, she has lovely
hands.
children, even with the chicken pox.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Just one, though.
Just one.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So,
we're good.
Then,
We're good.
then they have day camp, at
Yes.
least this week.
Right.
They're
Well,
really sweet.
we're all geographically separated, so we don't have to enjoy that. I have post chicken pox, which is called shingles. And that's not a fun thing to do.
No, it is not.
When it's
After
in your
years, I
outfit.
talked myself into taking the shots for the vaccination for it, and I've had the worst breakout I've ever had. So
Oh.
figure. And, but this too shall pass, as my mother says, my mother-in-law,
Yeah.
but she's my mother now. I stole her.
Because you stole her.
Yeah, right.
No, we pray for patience and we get shingles. That's how it works. Right?
We pray for patients so we can shingles.
No, that's the
Maybe
good
something
that
to that. I'm not
we're doing
sure.
right now.
Well,
You know?
the doctor prayed for patients too, and he got Terry with shingles.
Damn, doctor.
I'm not sure if that's all bad.
Let's rock
It
our
has
role.
something to do now.
Let's put
We
this thing
are
into
ready
action.
to take action.
people.
I'm a non-traditional type of medicinal, so I'm trying all kinds of over-the-counter stuff rather than deal with any kind of medications for this thing. And I just keep coming up with something new all the time. It's better, than it was 2 nights ago. It was. Well, we won't go down that road. We want to talk about action. In our book, the four of us put together a really fine book about people come first and our belief in the new business model where people really do come first, and really acknowledging the fact of what I have been teaching for 35 years. Do not use a checklist to fill your board. Do not use a checklist to fill your senior management. Go find brains that can do the job. The rest of the checklist will take care of themselves. If you go crazy trying to get a black person on the board, you may not have the best qualified. It might have been a woman. It might have been someone else, a Middle Easterner or something like that, who can kind of qualify. Native American. But, people are what drive everything. And if you, as leaders that are listening to this, come to the understanding that, the better you are, the more connected you are to your people, the harder they'll work for you, the more they will produce for you, and they will not leave your company. So that's the positives about this. And today we're talking about action. And Rob Pardi has a fabulous book and a great consulting business. And I'd like you to chime in, Rob, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your fabulous book and how you got to this spot with us today?
Sure. Okay. So, I first I just want to circle back on the comment you made about, bringing in the brains, right, and not having a checklist, because I do a lot of leadership work as well. I just don't hang my hat there because I like the personal transformation side. But a lot of the work I do is talking about, when you bring in the brains, you don't want to bring in the same mindset. You really want to have diversity in mindset so you can get innovation, creativity, and all that other stuff. So, diversity goes a lot further than gender, sexual orientation, color, race. It is the mindset. So, bring in the colors of the mindset as well. Anyway, that being said, action. So, possibility in action. That's the name of my book. That's the name of actually my personal philosophy, right? When I wrote Possibility in Action, I wrote about how I live my life. And I'm hoping that we're having strong enough internet for me to explain this. So I'm going to go all the way back, right? Like, I grew up with an abusive alcoholic dad. And so I learned at a very young age, besides learning about uncertainty and adversity and things out of my control, what I did learn is that intentional action and conscious choices were the tools I could use to change my situation. I went into economics. I became an investment banker because the child in me said, the best way to get away from your father is to make a lot of money so you're never dependent on him. That was action. That was intentional choice, conscious choice. So then when my wife was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer at a very young age, during her 11-year arc of the disease, we realized that either we were going to live around the disease or we were going to live in the disease. And that required action. That required daily action of how do we not make this the dominant color in our life? And so all of this sort of came to fruition because when she passed away and I looked at my life, I realized that I had gotten through everything by taking intentional steps to define my tomorrow. I truly believe that it's not our past that defines our future, but it's our present action that redefines our past. I am so thankful for the way I grew up because my dad taught me lessons that I used to build the life I have. At the same time, when I look at that, I realize all the skills that I brought forward with me. So when I talk about action, we tend to think action is maybe, just trying to force things to happen. And action is not necessarily fighting against something. It's fighting for something. It's constructing something. It's taking the tools you have and building, like I said, the tomorrow that you want. But you have to live it today in the actions you're taking. Are the actions you're taking aligned with where you want to go? That includes the people, right? I just recently recorded a little thing and, I said, your tribe is your vibe. And that's because if you want to take action, you need people that support the actions you're taking and where you want to go. If you don't have that, then that action is always going to be quelled by the people around you. So action is very, very big. And I know both, everybody on this call, but, Jenny and John are very much in this camp. So, but that is how possibility in action came to be. It was the way I always lived my life. And then finally I gave a name to it because I realized, and people have heard me say this a million times by now, that possibilities exist all around us. Without action, they remain in the land of wishing.
Mhm.
So
Fabulous.
that's why possibility and action together.
Fabulous, fabulous. Ladies and gentlemen, that's where action is all about. Presence is the point where manifestation becomes action. Take the angst of the past away, the fear of the future, and you have right here, right now. And that's when things start to come to light. What you're searching for becomes present. And you're right on the mark, Rob, when it talks about, you've got to be here. Okay. The other two sides of the time slot don't exist. They only exist in our minds. And to release that, it's not easy because we're emotional units. But there's power in taking a simple step, because that drives your next step. And that's all about what your wonderful story and your journey in bringing you to us today and all of that. And I want to bring in one of the co-authors, Jenny Langren, on this, because Jenny's been doing a lot of work in action within her business and that kind of stuff. I'd like you to chime in there, Miss Jenny.
Oh, Rob, I always love talking with you, and I love your language. And for every word you say, like, I have something that's so connected to that. Like, you speak of us as creators, like that's what I'm hearing. That's what's coming to me. And how also you're speaking of the past, and then sometimes we're also stuck on the future and live in fear of where our actions will take us. And again, it's so true that the future doesn't exist. The only thing that exists is this very moment that we spend together, and our presence and our actions in this moment is creating our future. And I've been through my life in so many situations when I felt like I didn't have choice. There was so much around me that was outside of my control. And healing really has been about coming back to the fact that I always have choice. Regardless the situation, I have the freedom to live my values. I have the freedom to listen into what's my authentic full body yes and what's my authentic full body no, and choose what to allow in my life and where to establish those boundaries. And it is through our actions that we create our lives. And it's so powerful. It's been reclaiming my power to enjoy my life again. Yeah, what's coming up for you, Linda?
Oh, there's this guy that talked about how he doesn't really like getting around to making his coffee, setting up his coffee thing at night, but he's so glad when he does it. So he sets it up at night, and then in the morning he says, "Thank you last night, David."
I love that.
Well,
But
Yeah, you sported in on and really touched on something, that we talk about in the book. And we all as a group believe in, and that is, there's no bad choices, no good choices, simply a choice. And we can always change our mind. And Rob, you started to come in with something?
Yeah, well, actually, just what you were saying now as well, right? As long as we're making that conscious choice, right? That choice has to be conscious. But I love the idea of thank you last night, David, because one of the things I tell people when they're like, well, how do I know I'm making a conscious choice, or how do I know it's aligned with what I want? This is one of the times I say, project yourself into the future. Will your future self thank you for the choice you're going to make right now? Or will your future self regret the choice you're about to make right now? Because it is not easy to be present, because it is very difficult to understand what that really means. But just like what Jenny said, right? Like when you're there, that's where your power lies. And we always do have choice. Sometimes it feels very, very difficult that we don't have choice, but it's always our thought. I joke about this, right? We should all have a cup of tea. I don't like tea, by the way. I'm just putting that out there. I'm a coffee drinker. Jenny, I think you drink tea up where you are, but it's more, I'm joking. But tea, when I say that, I'm like, it's our thoughts, our efforts, and our actions. If you want to
Absolutely.
understand what's under your control, there you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. John's bubbling there. I'm going to let him come in here. John, come in. Over.
Hey, everybody. It's funny, Robert, you were talking about the tea idea. And I've had many examples of my life where my thoughts and my actions did not align because I was really attempting to be a nice person right before I grabbed the person and threw him out of the building. So it's just like, I really wanted to be nice, but the situation allowed me to go crazy. And so it's been hard to rein that in because, it's sort of living by emotions is a really powerful and important way, but you have to determine which emotions you're going to let come out, just randomly. It can't be gumball thinking, which is you get the thought, it drops to your tongue and rolls out of your mouth, because then you're just going to have people very upset with you, all the time. So it can't just be, and I can go back to that story. It's a great story, except for the fact that there's justifications behind my behavior, except there's no justifications behind my behavior. I was in a position of authority and respect and responsibility. And so acting in the way of, a juvenile delinquent was not cohesive to the rest of my relationship with my employees. So it put people in a fearful position. It took months and months to get that confidence and comfort back. So we talk about trust being really hard to build up over a long period of time and very easy to ruin and get rid of. And it's exactly the same thing with the way in which we act. If people can see us as the kind and careful and justifiable person of helping and encouraging and nurturing, and then all of a sudden we lose it and all of that goes away, and it, well, now I think we've really seen his true colors here. So for me, it's really important to make sure that thoughts, emotions and actions all do sort of always make sure that they connect together. And Linda and I have talked about this a lot, which is the idea of that's why the book I wrote is called The Daily Six, because the idea is I only have enough to sort of remind me today. And then when I wake up tomorrow, I probably could use another set of principles to remind me that I'm supposed to be loving and grateful and forgiving and all these other things. And then finally make sure that I move this from an intention into a behavior. And the only way that happens is through action. Because I can have the best of intentions. How many times do we say that? Well, I didn't intend this to happen. I didn't intend. Well, that's a choice you made. You went from your intention to do it this way to your intention to do it this way. That sounds like a choice to me. That sounds like you made a choice to, maybe you're going to be nice about this and maybe you just didn't end up being that, but that's definitely a choice. I just had breakfast with a friend of mine who was talking about the idea of being grateful and taking action in gratitude. And he was talking about, and he was very complimentary about the idea that he had never really connected the idea of living a more peaceful and joyful life based in gratitude. And I said, it's really a whole lot easier to live gratefully and kindly than it is to be resentful and angry, because not only do we ruin this environment we're in, we also ruin it for ourselves because we're carrying all this anger and resentment around all the time and just looking for somebody to dump it on. So for me, action is not only making good choices to how to exist in the world and in the environment I spend time in. It's also a choice of how I want to react to my situations. If I set my intentions in the morning, one of the things I keep thinking about I should do is I should come up with an intention meter. Something that reminds us, I'll put in loving and kind, and then about every 20 minutes it beeps and says, how are you doing with that loving and kindness? You're still on track with that? And about
It's a great app.
Again, and 20 minutes later it does it again. Because what happens is the world comes in and slams into our intentions and forces us to make changes that really, if we just practice long enough, they wouldn't be forced, because we would realize that's not a good goal. That's not a good direction. A thing I always said in business is if the goals are clear, the decisions are easy. And so if my commitment is to be a loving and caring and supportive individual, and I show up in an environment, it's pretty easy for me to decide, is this loving and caring and supportive, or is it not? And if it's clear, if my goal is clear, then my decision as to whether to help or walk away is very clear. And I do a lot of work with recovery, and there's a phrase in recovery called, we've tried to find an easier, softer way, but we could not. And what I say to people is, The 12-step program for recovering people is the easier, softer way. And so what I say to the people that I work with is kindness, empathy, and action is the easier, softer way. Just be kind, be relating to other people's concerns and interests, and then move forward. And it takes away the, if I had any hair I could grow back, it would probably grow back, but it all fell out when I was being an ass, back in my 20s and 30s. So I can't fix that in me, but at least I don't have as many wrinkles. My daughter says my wrinkles are beginning to go away. So I'm happy that living more peacefully is just such a blessing that we can give to ourselves if we would just give it to ourselves, kind of thing.
That is so great. That there's so much that you said there that I hope people were taking notes, right? Because first, how you were saying, like, you may have had the intention to act one way and then you acted another way, and you said that was a choice. It was an unconscious choice, but it was a choice, right? Like, the future will happen with or without our input. Choices will always be made if we're not actually active in making the choice. And I think Jenny pulled out something so important. It's something I do every morning. Like, I have my list of values, and I have my top 5 values. I read them every morning. I remind myself that I want to show up as those values. Now, I think that the meter idea is absolutely great. I do some work with Liz Weissman's work in terms of multipliers on the business side, and we come up with a multiplier meter. How well have we been multiplying? I think that this idea is amazing that you just came up with. But in the evening, which is a Stoic practice anyway, right? It's not like I made this thing up. But in the evening, I say, okay, did I show up living my values? Mm-hmm. Because that's who I want to project into my today. Right. And the more, like John said, the more practice we have behind those actions, the easier it all becomes. And for sure, fighting against something, being in that state of regret, being in that state of anger, will always be the more difficult road, because that absorbs our energy. There's no construction out of anger. There is absolutely no creativity out of anger. There could be momentum. I was angry at my dad, for sure, when I was a kid, and that got me to be what I was, right? I studied hard. I got into school. I went to Columbia. I got my MBA. That little angry boy inside me got me so far, but it was not sustainable. Anger will never be sustainable. And when you step into the gratitude and you fully immerse yourself, right? That's the big thing. Because, and we said this before, I don't know, this too shall pass. Yeah, we were recording that, right? Terry, you said that while we were already live. Everything will pass, right? And so when you're in gratitude and you can embrace all the good and all the bad and be thankful for all of it, because it made you who you are at the moment. And if you're not happy with who you are at the moment, then ask yourself what you can change. But it's in that state of gratitude that there's the least resistance possible. So I think, yeah, that was just a great comment. And we went off on a tangent a little bit outside of action. Sorry, Terry, but
yeah,
no worries. Ladies and gentlemen, aren't you glad we are recording? Because that was the first thing I was going to say, regardless of what Rob said. I think Linda wants something to say. We're all pattern type people. Oh. And Linda has a great pattern system for learning.
She's been waiting patiently. She's got something.
I've been very patient. Yeah, I dropped 1,000 good lines on the way.
Well then, Linda, you just get to wait. Jenny?
Yes, happily so. So, John, I love that you bring up intentions, and I think we do that to ourselves. I do it often to myself in the morning, that I start my day with acting and inviting the world's intention into my living room or into my bedroom when I open my phone or I open my mailbox and I see the expectations or the requests of the people around me. And all of a sudden, I'm just drawn outside of myself into what I think other people are wanting from me or wanting my life to be or wanting my actions to be. So just to make that action, to set like 5 minutes aside for myself in the morning to begin my day with my intentions for my day and what do I want out of this day, that's so powerful to start out that way. And from a behavioral side of view, sometimes what holds us back from taking action is either we don't have the understanding of the situation or what to do, or we don't have the tools, we don't know how, or we lack purpose, which is our values. So yes, Rob, sometimes we feel like we're stuck or like we don't have choice. But I think regardless of where we are, we can always move in that direction of like, what do I want? What am I looking for? And it's just direction. It's not a huge transformation always from one day to another. It's to take that direction where we want to go. And I think it begins with realigning with our purpose and living our purpose. And that's a relief. Like that's peace.
Well, I have a question for the behavioral scientist here.
Mm-hmm.
So Rob mentioned anger.
Yeah.
Is anger going to give you a dopamine hit? Because then he mentioned, the flip. And is that, because it was kind of like that idea of enoughness, because enoughness is serotonin. So is anger like can anger be like a dopamine hit?
Good question. I think I can't get
because
a
it can
straight
be
answer.
addictive and
not
enough. You got to keep
suck
getting
you,
angry because it just wasn't enough to be
well,
angry.
it can
once.
suck you into the drama for sure. And we've had conversations about the healthy anger, about the unhealthy anger, right? So I think there's
even healthy rage.
There's a healthy rage that is connected to your worth. It's that healthy. How dare you? How dare you cross the boundary with me? Yeah, it's connection with my worth. And it says something about where I want to reclaim my power in my life. That's somewhere I want to take action. So there's energy in that. And I'll get back to you.
The whole land of non-duality, though, right? You know, it's like, that's good. So it's all about, in my world, it's all about noticing and not labeling this is good, this is bad. Keep it at it just is. And so many of us don't want to do that because guess what? It takes some neural energy and we can just like stop there and then we don't have to do anything and we just label it and then we can get into confusion and we have all our depression. Really, really stop action there, right? So it forces you to make a decision. So if you're not labeling and it just is, then you're totally at choice, and then it's about making the decision. And when we just kind of stay in flow of it and almost let the decision just take care of itself and come up for us, it's just pretty easy. Right? You just practice that.
And like Terry says, we can evaluate. It's a journey, it's an exploration. We're not just checking the boxes and making it perfect. We are free. I can take a new course of action tomorrow if I like. And that's a really good leadership skill in my view, that you are willing and curious to look at the information, the awareness that you have at hand today and take your course of action based on that. And I think Rob was on this track that when we do, it's really not about what we're letting go of. It's not about that. It's what we're choosing for ourselves, for our future and the future that we're creating.
Yeah. You also mentioned, did you say the word like soft? Because I just saw Mike Stevenson get his memoir that he shelved about 10 years ago out into a book. And the subtitle is Soft Power is the New Hard Edge. Let's create the world together. Yeah. So good.
So that's what everybody's saying, I got to stop here and reflect. There has not been a time in this journey with these four people where I haven't been in awe of the basis of their being is kindness, because you can't give what you don't have. So be kind to yourself, give kindness away, those people that receive your kindness will give it to others, who will give it to others in your stead. And before you know it, all that kindness is coming right back at you. And Rob, I too have a morning mantra that has 12 items in it, not 12 steps, but 12 items in it that can be put in any order. And I let them free flow every day, so that they're not neither a pattern or a stiff connection to my wants, needs, desires, goals, blah, blah, blah. They are a part of me that I get to reflect on every day. And we're coming to the end of our program now, which is fabulous. Ladies and gentlemen, aren't you glad these are recorded, because they're amazing? And I'd like to get some final thoughts today, certainly starting with the man of action, our guest, Rob Pardi. Thanks again for coming. And do you have some final thoughts about what we've talked about today? And there's a whole lot.
Oh yeah, we spoke about so much, and what I would say, one, I think Jenny, nailed it in terms of we're not married to the one direction we're going in, right? So we have the ability to change direction whenever we want. And so anyone listening to this, the direction of your life is really tied to taking those intentions we've been talking about and putting it into conscious action. What I'd like to say is that, this isn't, oh, wow, I'm just going to take action and everything is going to flow so freely from this point forward, right? It is, so many people have used this terminology of a plane adjusting, small little adjustments here and there. And so it's course correcting. Be open to say, okay, you know what? I need to make a little tweak here, and I need to make a little tweak there. That it's just not you set something in action and it's going to roll by itself. You have to stay connected with it. And I hope that you heard all that, because I see all of you on my end are frozen. But
No, we're still here. We're still active. John?
Well, I got another 20 minutes worth of talking to do, so I'm sorry. The thing that I wanted to say about action is that can also be inaction, can be an action. And for me, one of the things that reminds me is a friend of mine used this analogy, and I use it all the time now, and it can be for positive or negative emotions. But if anybody has ever tried to ride a wave in the ocean or anything like that, there's a point at which, when you're riding the wave, the power of the wave builds up, and at some point you can still drop back. At some point you can still say, I don't really want to do this. And it's the same way with anger, resentment, judgments, everything else. There's a point at which you don't have to go all the way in. You can step back and go, probably not a good decision to do today. So it's a really important to realize that sometimes that change of perspective or change of intention or a clarity of intention or inaction, I'm not going to punch this person in the face. That's probably not a really good way to say I love you. It's just not a good way to say I love you. So behavior is something that takes so much practice. And, you pick up the telephone and you hang up and you go, ugh, kind of thing. But nowadays, the distance between the thought of frustration and anger and the behavior in here, it just mitigates immediately. It doesn't have any place to gather purchase in me anymore. It just doesn't. So the more that I can just let that sort of go out, it's not as if the world's going to get better. People are still going to cut you off in traffic. People are still going to cut you off. There's going to be people with 20 items in the 10-person item line in the grocery store. They're still going to be there. But I don't care, because I would just like to be living intentionally. And for me, that's just paying attention. I was walking in a coffee shop this morning to meet this guy, and there's a little girl, probably 2 years old, sitting on the sidewalk drawing pictures with chalk. And normally I would have just walked around her and walked on in the building and wouldn't even have paid much attention. But nowadays I stopped and looked at what she was doing, and one of her pieces of chalk was rolling away. And so I picked it up and put it back in front of her, and she was so excited about that. And when I looked up, there was like 10 people inside and outside smiling at me, because all I did was stop for 10 seconds and pick up a piece of chalk and put it in front of the little girl. And when I looked up, that much energy coming to me that was positive just fed my behavior. And I opened the door and went in, and I saw my friend. He gave me a big hug. And it was just all of a sudden, what went from a quiet, peaceful day turned into an immediate sense of joy and love and inclusion. And all it took for me was to pay attention. So paying attention is kind of important. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, how about the Swede twins? What are they doing?
Let me go first.
Yeah.
So I'm going to piggyback on something that you said, Terry, and it was about your list in the morning and how that really is about who you are. And I think that's so important, that sometimes we set goals for ourselves, or we have this idea of what we want to accomplish or what we want our business to be like. And it's really coming from somewhere else. It's not aligned with what's truly important with us and what we truly value. And that's such a comfort, because it's not about hard work in that sense that we sometimes tell ourselves. It's about recognizing. It's about listening inward. It's about reconnecting. Because when we start living that life that flows from us, we're going to enjoy it. That's going to be a lot of fun, right, Linda?
John's words from us. I love that. It's
stepping
such a good
into
teaching.
pleasure. That's such a good teaching. So it's really about being. And I thought that was important to add. Linda?
I don't know. I'm good at the moment. I'm sure I'll interrupt somebody in a minute.
Wrapping up.
I don't
For me, it's a compilation of what was said today. And, you know, we as beings get to make decisions. And me, for instance, I'm not the person I was yesterday, and I'm not the person I'm going to be tomorrow. The person I am going to be tomorrow is based on the decisions I make today and what the journey in life up to today has brought forth to me in countersinks, and that's good and bad, fun and all of those kinds of things make us who we are. Not a victim, but a victor. We're still here. I'm 70 years old. I'm still standing here. You know, I joke, it's better to be seen than viewed. And for those of you who get that, I'm sure you're laughing right now, but it's true. You know, none of us are the persons we started out with this morning. And like Rob and myself, we have these little things that we do in the morning that set a tone that we can emulate from, because we are also musical beings. I mean, even our heartbeat is musical. So there's a lot of setting the tone that can be brought forth. You know, the only difference in the stress in the body between hard, bad stress and good stress is how long you hang on to it. You know, bad stress seems to just kind of hang on, but the good stuff kind of flutes and goes away. Well, hang on to that good stuff. Make a conscious decision to hang on to the good stuff, because the good stuff will change to who you are tomorrow. Any last thoughts, gang? Oh, Linda's found something.
Yeah. So it is what it is. This too shall pass. Let it go. And I love how John brought up the Saturday night live skit. He, you know, when we were even probably first working together. And it's the one where if you drop your keys in lava, let it go.
Yeah,
that one. So it's noticing, and noticing also what's going on around you, what's coming up in you, like Jenny touched on the, you know, yes and no in the body, you know. Yeah, it's all good, guys.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Yes, thank you, Rob. Fabulous. I knew this was going to be incredible, and it was on point, and you were on point. And thank you again for sharing our world with us and everyone who's going to be listening to this now and in the future. Thank you again, very sincerely.
Thank you.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have one chapter left, and in 2 weeks, you get to hear all about it. It's talking about gratitude. We kind of talked about that a little bit now and then today, and I hope you'll join us then, as you have for this whole series. Thanks again, and bye for now.